Hello, everybody. We're back. Episode 28, presented by SodaStick.com. Joining us now for our first segment, our very favorite guest, Pat Micheletti. Pat, what's going on, man?
I better be your favorite guest.
Well, we've had him on 3 times.
Yes, my third time. Woo!
The champ.
I love
a
coming
real
on
beaut.
with you guys. I love coming on with you guys.
We're your favorite. You're everywhere,
Yes.
so I think we're your favorite, though.
Without a doubt.
I like it.
Yeah.
Take that,
Yes.
Kevin Faldness and Beyond the Pond.
Oh, yeah. Really.
He's my boss. He's listening. He's like, yeah, you know what? We don't want you to come back next year.
I haven't seen Kevin all summer.
Me neither.
Yeah. Woo-hoo. Toast.
Speaking of not seeing fullness, RIP that.
Yeah.
Hockey. Pat, do you think
Yes.
the NHL is actually going to make a comeback? They're now in phase 2. Wild players started skating at Tria on Wednesday. We caught up with Devin Dubnyk a little bit, who was one of the handful of guys that were at Tria. But do you think hockey is actually going to make the push and come back from this?
Well, I really wanted to. We all wanted to. I mean, that's our livelihood. That's what we do. But on the other side of it, with everything that's popped up recently, and we're seeing teams coming back and training facilities, and not just hockey, but football, baseball, everything, right? Mm-hmm. And we're seeing all these cases, and I'm still very skeptical that it is going to happen. I know it's kind of a downer, but there's just so many things that we don't even know about that they have to figure out. That I said this 100 times. I want to come back when we know everybody's going to be safe, and that would be for all sports. I know it's hard, it's tough, it's not fun for anybody, but I just don't want us to get in a situation where we start it, then have to stop it, and then when's it going to start again? Mm-hmm. And where are we? We're talking football, baseball. I can see with golf going on now, and even them are having some problems. I think they're doing a terrific job, but there's still cases that are out there, and so how do we handle it? And now you're talking a contact sport, with football, with basketball, with hockey, the worst sports that could really start out. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that that we find a solution fast, and that we just do it smart.
I would agree. I mean, that's kind of been my stance from the get-go, like not to be the negative Nancy, but I think there's just so many variables that need to be considered before you can even venture into it. I mean, like you had mentioned, teams down in Florida, the Tampa Bay Lightning, they had 19 players now who are skating down there that tested positive because it just spreads. And so many people are asymptomatic. So I think that makes it even more challenging, right? Because all of a sudden you're like, well, I feel fine and I look fine and everything's good, but you still carry it. And again, we don't know the long-term consequences of this disease. And there's just still so much unknown, and you would have to go through so much where it's like, if you're removing elements of the game or you're having to change everything in order to allow it to play, like, is it worth it? Right. Yeah. Like, I think, again, like you said, we miss it. I love hockey more than anybody. And I would love to nothing more than to see a Stanley Cup playoffs happen. But
what about the athletes that don't want to leave their families?
Yeah.
What about the athletes that are that their immune systems are suppressed, like mine is, whether it be from diabetes or cancer or a transplant or whatever. Mm-hmm. Those people are putting, their lives at risk, and, you got to weigh, is it what's worth it and what's not worth it? And, again, we go back to safety versus financial. Mm-hmm. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. And, so we got to hope for is a vaccine, right? And who knows when that is going to happen.
Well, and I've seen people saying on Twitter as well, just in regards to hockey, that like we have more cases now than we did when they first shut down hockey, and they're like, and now
Right.
they're still trying to move forward with it. They're like, how is that making sense if you're saying, well, we had 0 cases when we closed down back in March, and now we have a handful of cases and we're still trying to go forward? So it's like, at what point do you just keep waiting, like you said, Pat? At what point do you weigh the financial risk versus the safety? I mean, there's risks, safety and health wise, in just about any job, whether that's a mental or physical risk that you put yourself at. But it's like, this is a whole other level of safety issues that you're talking about. And it's just, at what point do you say, we just have to move forward? And at what point do you say, well, we can wait a little bit longer? And I think it's going to be very similar with, just how everything shut down. I've said this in previous episodes too. It's going to be a domino effect the other way. As soon as people start opening up, as soon as sports start playing and teams start gathering, it's going to be one after the other, and it's just going to keep going more and more. So it's going to be monkey see, monkey do here for a little while. And you just hope that teams don't have to, and leagues don't have to then backtrack once we get to that point where we start practicing where we're at now and then playing games at some point maybe. And it's frustrating trying to follow the news of all of this.
Right. And what I don't like is, a lot of people are saying, well, this sport got to get out first. Like, let's beat them because it's not their time. We can get the TV revenue, and I get it, I get that, but for what reason? I mean, by the time we start, it will be the end of July potentially,
beginning of August.
For games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Beginning of August, right? And so why not wait? Then, in reality, training camps start typically September, right? Mid-September. And what's a month? And start your season if you can then.
Right.
Is what I look at. And I'm more worried. I mean, I'm more worried about, look at the college landscape. That you want to talk about university schools that rely on season ticket sales, right? We could lose, a lot of teams in college hockey, and that's a tough one.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one big thing I wanted to talk to you, because you're my college hockey guy, right? You're my go-to.
He's wearing the NCHC hat too, for those who are watching.
Shout out to Josh Fenton and crew.
See my hair. I'm actually getting my hair cut right after this, so I don't want to, have you see my hair.
No, but I think you're absolutely right, because that's a big concern we're already seeing. I think college hockey get a little nervous and trying to figure out. I mean, you look at non-conference games and the travel that's involved, and it's a lot. Do you think that how does college hockey kind of come back from this, and how did they? I mean, they had to end their season unceremoniously, like we had talked about. I think you were on when they canceled the Frozen Four, and that's so sad for these student athletes. And then now what happens? How do they move forward? What needs to change, and how are they able to start a season, or are they able to? Especially, I mean, Gopher hockey. It's 100 years this year. Congrats to them.
Yes.
How do you move forward? What's their next steps?
Well, listen, I'm going on the radical side here, and due to this pandemic that we're in, if I'm the guru of college hockey, I completely revamp it for this year, and that means everything has to be all geographical, right? It all has to be, and it's kind of like putting the old WCHA together. We have 5 teams in the state of Minnesota, and you want to cut down on your travel costs. Well, it would be a bus league, right? And the same with all the Michigan schools. So, it's literally creating new leagues for a year. And you have all of Hockey East, and you have the ECAC. They're all bus leagues. So I think you need to do that this year, and you can still have your tournaments and your NCAAs and blah blah blah. But the financial situation that some of these schools are going to be in is literally going to be devastating to them, especially if you don't have fans. A team like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan State, they can probably make it. But what about Lake Superior State? What about Northern Michigan? What about teams like that? Bemidji State, do you expect them to fly, to Alaska and, wherever else they have to go to? I don't, if we want to keep everything alive, then you have to do radical things to, at least until things settle down, in my opinion.
Well, and the interesting point to that, and it's funny because I talk with my boss, Dave Jensen, who you know very well. We've chatted about that too, where from a fan standpoint then too, when it does come back and when fans are allowed, it's a lot easier for a St. Cloud fan to come down and watch them play the Gophers, right? Rather than going, who's going to fly out and watch them play at Penn State? And again, I've always been a big fan of the Big Ten. I'm not knocking that by any means, but I think you're absolutely right.
It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with the here and now. And what are we going to do to survive? I mean, we're almost in a survival mode, in my estimation, anyway. Talking to coaches, listen. You've got Western Michigan and Miami in the NCHC, for example, right? And not that they don't like the league, but they hate the travel, and it's very expensive. And they would certainly love to get on a bus and go play Bowling Green and go home that same night. Right?
Yeah. Well, and like you said, there's no better time to do it now. I mean, if you kind of pass up this opportunity to, like, as you said, revamp it, when do you take that opportunity again? Once we get back into the groove of things, they might just keep pushing something like that off because it's just working. So now is a time to say, hey, we have some, I don't know if you want to say free time, but we have a little bit of time here to kind of figure out how we can make this work better for these athletes, find a way for these schools to save money so that they can get through this in one piece, and preserve some of these teams who maybe might not make it through this. We've already, Alabama Huntsville died and came back to life here all in 1 week, but we've already seen some of that happen where some of these schools might not make it through with the same amount of teams and the same kind of funds as they've always had. So, I mean, it is the perfect time to really kind of rethink some of this stuff and help these teams benefit in the long term, not just necessarily to get through this COVID phase of low funds and all of that and surviving, but to, in the long term, just have these teams have, more money available to do more with that and to help the team and the schools grow financially.
And since we're talking all sports in general, Western Michigan has already cut 5 sports.
Yeah.
Bowling Green, I believe, has cut 2. And think of all the other athletes, right, that are going to lose out on their opportunity. So this is a time where everybody needs to come together, throw their egos right out the door, and do what's best for everybody.
And I mean, it's one of those things too. If it doesn't work, then you go back to what you knew, I guess, right? Like, it doesn't hurt anything. Like, give it a shot, see what happens. I would completely agree. I think it just try it out, see what, and it'll help you in the long run, I think. And it could, get some new fans in too, and reignite some passion for college hockey.
Think about it. I mean, look at the state of Minnesota now, right? You would have had Bemidji State, Minnesota State, and UMD, and maybe an outside shot, Minnesota would have made the tournament this year, right?
Yeah.
But that aside, we have 5 really, really good programs in this league, and anyone can beat anyone, and the rivalries, and I just wish we were smarter about things, and it drives me crazy. I don't care if I say it, because you know what? It's just reality. And everyone you talk to, I wish this would happen. I wish this would happen. Well, no one does anything. And it bothers.
Sticking with college hockey too, Don Lucia, now big fancy commissioner. How do you think he might help CCHA, and what do you see kind of doing there? And why is it a job that maybe he wanted to take? For me, that sounded a little kind of like, oh, okay. Why do you think there was interest there from him?
Well, I think once you are in the game and you leave it, you realize how much you miss it. And so I think that's a big part of it. I think he's got a really tough job. I think he's got again, it goes back to, that league will be the CCHA next season. I think it's going to be tough. They're without a TV contract, obviously. I think that's important. And he's dealing with a lot of small schools. I think it's going to be a tough job, challenging job. He's willing to take it on, and good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's fun to see him, like you said, still be in the game, and we've known him for so long here in Minnesota, and I'm intrigued to see what happens with the CCHA in general.
Right.
Because, like you said, it kind of went away, and it's small, and it's kind of people forgot about it a little bit. So it'll be curious. Flipping back over to the NHL, Minnesota is officially out as a hub city. They've eliminated quite a few. I know. Do you think, Minnesota obviously was a beloved spot. I thought it was very high on the list. What do you think? And I would like to stick the riot stuff aside. I don't think that had anything to do with it. But why do you think Minnesota didn't appeal to the NHL?
That's a really, really good question, because when you start checking the boxes, they have everything. And if you're looking at from a health standpoint, I think our state has done really well. Yeah. And now you're talking Nevada, and they're going great, and you're talking LA. Yeah. The
Kings aren't even in it, for crying out loud. What are we going to LA for?
No. And as far as facilities, ours match up better than Vegas does. Who knows? My head is spinning on that one. It really surprises me. I'm not surprised they're going to Canada if that ends up being one of the, who wants to go to Edmonton, but nothing.
Sorry, Oilers fans that are listening.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Oh, oops. I don't know. That's kind of baffling.
Yeah, I think it was very apparent they wanted one in Canada, which I get, that's not a surprise. But it seems like they wanted to force the Vegas one too a lot. And I feel like the NHL's really just had this hard on for Vegas in general, which
a lot of it might have been, hey, we owe you for, not having our NHL awards there and bringing a lot of people there then. And, let's go back now. Who knows? Could be I know they, their hotel situation obviously is great. I'm curious about how the ice is going to be. 110 degrees in July and August, not the easiest thing to do,
Yeah, it's going to be toasty if that's where they end up going, but.
Right.
I'm curious. I'm excited to see, I guess, what happens. Again, that inches closer to starting an NHL season, which I can't get excited, guys. I'm sorry. I can't get excited about it. I don't know.
It'll be interesting. Broadcasters might not, TV crews may not even be allowed there other than cameramen. The media types, all of us not allowed.
Literally all three of us that are on this right now, we're out anyway.
I think it's going to be, people have asked me, and what would it be like to play, without fans? And we as athletes, and you guys know this, that kind of gets your adrenaline going, right? Yeah. That pumps you up. That makes you want to play. What are you going to rely on, other than your own mental, some guys will have it, some guys won't. And that's just reality. So I'm that's why the one thing that intrigues me about the playoffs happening is that it's up for grabs. Anybody could win.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you think Minnesota fares against Vancouver in a best of five?
Hey, you get a hot goalie. That's all you need.
Yeah, I will say, and
that's why people say, well, who do you like? I said, hey, who's the best goalie in the league? I think Carey Price is, in my opinion, right? I do.
Hot take.
But who?
I said that's a hot take,
Pat.
Pat.
Hot take.
Oh, it's a hot take. I thought you said another name there.
I'm sorry. No.
Hasek.
But look at it. If Carey Price gets hot, who's to say, right?
Right.
It's hard enough to score goals in this league, and you defend and because listen, it's not going to be up tempo hockey. I don't believe.
Yeah.
I think people are going to play it really close to the vest and try to only give up 1 or 2 a game and hope to get to 3.
Well, hey, we've seen what
Not
goalies
but,
have done to the Wild in the playoffs in seasons past. Look what Jake
right.
Allen did to the Wild. Look what with Winnipeg. I mean, it's like we have seen. They say defense wins championships, which I always scoff at, but at the end of the day, it is there is truth to it in the sense that is how you can win series and win games at the end of the day. And so, we talked about this when they first announced, the full playoff matchups and stuff if the season resumes. And Jesse and I kind of agreed the Wild are very evenly matched up against Vancouver. And I said, if it comes down to goalies, I kind of like the Wild's odds if that's kind of where you're going to give the nod to these two teams. So I don't know.
No,
yeah, so
I don't.
I
think Jacob Markstrom is a phenomenal goalie, and I'm terrified of him. And
he is, yeah. No shade to Jacob Markstrom.
but Jesse, there's not many teams in the league that has a core defense like Minnesota does.
Yeah.
When you have Suter and Brodin and Spurgeon and Dumba, who was probably a lot healthier now and ready to go. Boy, oh boy, I tell you what, if Minnesota can defend, and I don't know who the goaltender is going to be.
I was just going to say that's going to be a big factor in it as well, because either right now it's 50-50 if you ask me.
And Devin Dubnyk yesterday said that he's ready.
It's 33. It's not 50-50. It's 33-33-33. Right?
Yeah, true.
You got to throw Kakinen in there because he's young. He had a great year. He proved he could play up here.
Yeah, he played well.
Who knows, right? So I mean, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
And you need one of them to step
play
up.
Well. Yeah.
And so who knows?
And again, it's funny. We had talked to, like I said earlier, we talked with Devin Dubnyk, who has been skating with the team, and he said he's coming in fully ready to try take that starting role back from Al. No disrespect, but it's a game, and he wants to take the net back a little bit, and I think he's very eager to vie for that spot. And I would agree. I love the idea of trying to mix in Capo and truly seeing, because again, as I think we've talked many times before, you need to know if you need to find another goaltender, because frankly, what the Wild have right now, it's like you think Capo's next and he's it, or you need to go find somebody on the market.
Yeah.
So I think and how do you think, now that brings up a good point, how do you think having the playoffs now in the summer, how does that affect Bill's position on how he frames his team for next season, right? Like how do you do it? What happens there?
I'm sure that they're able to talk to teams, and if this happens, if that happens, but I think it'll be difficult because take a guy like, do you bring back Mikko for another year? If he decides not to retire or if he wants to play, those are questions that they have to answer. What about, the young guys that they may want to insert in a lineup, or do they go with the same team? I mean,
sure.
And can you move a player that maybe has a no-move contract and now, we can't now because of the financials of everything? It's really difficult. Really going to be difficult. It'll be challenging for them, but that's why there's so much that's unknown, and I just want to get it right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most important, right? Like it's in the mix of trying things and seeing what happens, you don't want to screw it up. At the end of the day, it's like you can't afford to, especially hockey, a sport that kind of wavers in the top 4, in and out of the top 4 sports in the US. It's like you can't get it wrong because you don't have the fan base to still kind of keep moving forward. What about coaches for for Bill? I mean, do you think Dean Ebsen, obviously he'll finish out this year, but I never foresaw him being the next guy. But again, how does this affect the coaching search too? And when do you bring in a new coach, and how early can you try to make that announcement?
Well, there again, right? Same thing. I don't think that he was at the top of the list when they named him the interim, but he's certainly proven, and it seems like he had the team going in the right direction. I know it's a very short span of time, but the guys seem to like playing for him. He knows what he's doing.
Mhm.
You know, he wouldn't be in the position he is unless he knew what he was doing. He played a long time in the league. He's a good guy. Knows the game, and so I don't know. I think he's, the longer this goes on, the better for him.
Yeah, true. More time to prove himself. Yeah.
Well, and I think, I just think that they don't want to upset the apple cart too much, and come in with a new coach and new system. Especially if you're going to have the majority of the same guys, and they like them. And listen, that's half the battle. All these coaches, they can all coach.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, can you keep your room? Can you keep everybody
finding the right
happy?
fit? Yeah.
Finding the right fit. Does everybody buy in? Does the team buy into each other because of this guy? All of that. And so, I think if I'm a betting guy, I think he'll be the coach next year.
Okay. See, that's another. I mean, before we do let you go, I want one final hot take. Yeah. Pat's hot take.
Yes.
So say we come back. Hockey's back. COVID's gone. We killed it. We won. We won the battle. Who wins the Stanley Cup? Who are your Stanley Cup champs this year?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
It really.
I hate when I get asked this question.
It's one of 24 teams, but I'm going to go with the sleeper team. I'm sticking with the Montreal Canadiens.
Carey Price.
He's really just riding that Carey Price train.
I'm riding the goaltender. I'm riding the hot goaltender.
He's going to be right too, and we're going to have him
I'll
back
never
on
be
again.
On again. After that hot take, you'll never have me on again.
Canadians are out in the first round. Pat just never wants to come back on.
Immediate 3 games done. God. Yeah, I love it. Well, Pat, we appreciate you. We always love having you on. We will have you on again.
I love coming on with you guys. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Pat.
Bye-bye.
And before we get to our next guest, Brock McGillis, we want to take a quick break to give a shout out to our presenting sponsor, sodastick.com, who we love. We love them so much. I actually just ordered their latest Lake Life shirt
cool.
that they teamed up with Mick Golden Light on again. I feel like I'm retro. I'm very retro now. I'm hip. I'm trying to be cool because it's a very 80s style, bright colors, and it exemplifies Minnesota, Mick Golden Light and the lakes and everything. So go check out.
For?
I know.
Yeah.
it's
literally beautiful. That's all there is to it. Soda Stick nailed it. You don't need anything else. That's right there.
You don't. So go buy one. Match me. We could be twins. Twinning, yay! Toss down that Bardown Beauties code at checkout for free shipping on all purchases. So thanks to them again. Love you guys. And,
love you.
We'll be right back with Brock. We're back. Joining us now, Brock McGillis, the first ever openly gay hockey player with a penchant for educating and changing the hockey culture, plus a pretty amazing dog dad from the sounds of it, right? Minus the pee that you had to clean up right before our recording, but I'm glad you were able to do that.
I think that makes me a good dog dad.
Yeah, that's true. You're cleaning it up. But no, Brock, thank you so much for joining us. As we've been trying to do more on some of our episodes here, is just try to talk a little bit about the hockey culture and the way it is and the way it needs to change in order to move forward and help grow the game and help make the game more inclusive. Just share a little bit first about your story. When, you grew up, and you obviously grew up playing hockey. You're Canadian. We won't hold that against you, I promise. As Minnesotans, we do think of ourselves.
I'm pretty sure right now, based off what's going on with COVID in the United States, that all of you would be grateful to be Canadian today. So
he's got to start, Jesse.
Yes.
Justin Trudeau versus Donald Trump.
Let's just. Okay.
Fair enough.
We're all defecting anyway. Yeah. No, but tell us a little bit about your story then. When did you kind of first know that you were gay, and how did that, include in hockey? How did you figure out when to say something or when to kind of become open about it?
Yeah. I remember being 6 years old, and I was watching a movie with my parents, and there's a gay character, and I said, "What if I'm gay?" And they said, "If you're gay, you're gay. You're Brock. We love you." And I'm pretty sure I ran to my room and cried. But I sort of suppressed that. It was always in the back of my mind, but I sort of suppressed it because I became so immersed in hockey, and that became my entire focus. I was that stereotypical Canadian hockey kid who was on the ice. I lived down the street from an arena in a small town, and teams from the city nearby would come practice there because the ice time was cheaper. And I would literally show up to the rink in the morning with my equipment, and any team that was missing a goalie, I would jump on the ice with. And my parents would have to drop all my meals off at the rink. When nobody was on the ice and the ice was free, I would jump on. I was on the ice about 14 to 15 times a week. Yeah, like I was just addicted. And I got pretty good and started playing like AAA and different levels growing up, and worked my way into junior hockey. And it was around the time that I was getting ready for drafts into the OHL and whatnot that I started to recognize, puberty was starting to hit in full force, and I started to realize that what the other guys in the room were talking about, I didn't fully feel the same way, but faked it. And pretended to be the straight hockey bro. And by the time I got to the OHL, I had immersed myself in that culture fully. I was, I'm ashamed to admit this, but I do because I think it's important. I was a womanizer. I walked into rooms like I owned the place. I thought I was a gift to the world and acted that way. But I'd go home at night and I'd cry. And I hated myself. And most days I wanted to die. And on more than one occasion, I tried to take my life. And struggled with that for a long time. From the age of 18 to 23, I drank daily. At 23, I went from being on NHL draft lists and supposed to have this, linear trajectory to the NHL to I had a season-ending injury every year from 15 until I retired. I had mono 3 times, which is like I should be in the Guinness Book of World Records. That's like nearly impossible. Right. But from 18 to 23, I was drinking daily. And finally at 23, I was sitting in the minors in Europe. And I sat myself down and I said, you need to figure this out. So I came back and I went on a date with a guy. And actually ended up dating him for 3 years. Nice. And at that point, I was like, this is amazing. Like, I now have accepted the fact that I'm gay. Except it got worse because I thought like my career would get back on track. I'd make the NHL. It'd be a longer road, but that's okay. I can do it. But now I was in the closet and hiding somebody else. Not one person in my life knew he existed. We had an alias for me with his friends, so they couldn't find me on social media and figure out that I was a professional hockey player.
Did you even keep him from your parents? Because like you said, it seemed like they were very accepting right away, or when you were younger, right? But did you keep him a secret then too?
I kept him from everyone, and I'll tell you why. The reason I did, and right after we broke up, I decided to take a step back from professional hockey. And it's really weird that a year ago, almost to the day right now, I was in LA filming a show. And I was going to a gym at like 7:30 in the morning, and I crossed an intersection and he was crossing on the other side of the street, and we hadn't seen each other in 10 years.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that fucked up?
That's crazy.
So crazy.
Yeah.
And you recognized him right away. Like you knew like he looked the same. And we
dated for 3 years,
right.
It was like my jaw dropped. It was very overwhelming. But right after we broke up, I moved to Montreal and decided to take a step back from hockey professionally and go to school and play Canadian university hockey. And while I was there, I became friends with Brendan Burke. And Brendan is son of Brian Burke. And he had just come out, and I reached out and we hit it off because, we understood each other. Mm-hmm. And one day he sent me a text message that said, I can't wait for the day that you're out to your family like I am to mine.
Oh.
And I looked at it and I panicked. And I panicked not because I didn't think my family would be inclusive or supportive. I knew they would. But my dad coached AAA and junior hockey for 30 plus years. He was a scout in the OHL. My brother played he was a first round pick in the OHL and played professionally. I feared that they would become more sensitive to the language used in locker rooms and the culture as a whole, and stand up to it, and in the process out me. So I didn't answer Brendan that day, and 2 days later he actually passed away in a car accident. And those ended up being the last words he ever said to me. And shortly after, I came out to my brother and then my family.
That's amazing.
Wow.
And I mean,
Yeah.
like you had mentioned, because everyone who knows Brian Burke, right? He's hockey, and he's what you would think of, I guess, in hockey, and he's that very stand-up. But when Brendan came out, because obviously, you know, I work with USA Hockey, and we know Brendan Burke, or the Burke's family, very well. But it was to have Brian support Brendan like that and have that type of figure. I mean, I imagine you guys have a very similar them, because like you said, your dad's involved in hockey and everybody else. So I mean, how important do you think it is to have stronger, prominent people in hockey be more accepting and more vocal and say, you know what, hey, because I mean, I think more and more people, you know, somebody that is gay, or you know, somebody in the LGBT community, and it's not as, you know, it's not as small as people think it is. You would hope that more people become allies, right?
Completely. I mean, it's funny, a year ago, I was at World Pride in New York, and we were getting ready to walk in the parade, and it was delayed. So we were sitting in a bar, and I was sitting with Brian, and my partner was with me, and he whispered to me at one point, he goes, "This guy reminds me of your dad." They're very similar statures,
Okay.
very similar philosophies, and they're larger than life personalities. So it was, you know, it was a very big, having Brian come out and in support of Brendan, you know, I think helped a lot of people, helped a lot of parents who didn't get it or weren't willing to get it. And to see somebody who's this truculent, as he likes to say, person, be supportive of that, maybe humanized it and normalized it for some other people who thought it was a bad thing. I think it is important for allies to come out. I think it's really important for allies to be vocal in terms of their support. I think it's also important that if you're going to go beyond just saying I'm supportive or whatnot, to educate yourself, because it could be dangerous at times when you see allies say some things and you're like, well, that's not, I know your intentions are good, but that actually isn't, you know, right, or different things like that. So there's like this fine line that can lead to like problematic stuff if they, you know, trying to be like us, like speaking on behalf of Black people through Black Lives Matter, right? So it's finding that line. Also, in terms of everyone knowing somebody who identifies part of the community, everywhere I speak, the first thing I do is I ask who here knows somebody who's part of the LGBTQ+. Doesn't matter if it's a major corporate, doesn't matter if it's a high school or a locker room. First thing I ask. And because I want them, when they hear my story, I want them to think about the people in their life. I want to humanize it. And then the second thing I do is I ask them who here has used homophobic language. Because I think when we start looking at it and they go, oh shit, I use that, and my aunt's a lesbian, or, you know, my gay cousin, now it hits a little closer to home, and now there might be opportunity for people to really engage in what I'm saying. So, but I haven't gone everywhere I've gone to speak, there's yet to be at least 95% of the hands up when I ask who here knows somebody who's part of the community. Yeah. And also 95% of the hands go up when I ask who's used homophobic language. So
yeah.
Do you think, one thing I find kind of interesting is, do you think it's more difficult to be gay playing a male sport versus a female, right? Because I think, you know, wrong to say this, but people make fun of, oh, well, of course she plays basketball, she's a lesbian, or softball players are all, you know, like, but do you think it's more accepted in a female, like it's, well, of course she's gay, versus the male where there's this just toxicity around it because it's such a masculine thing, right? And it's very emasculating to be gay, right? In that accordance, do you think, what's the differences there that you see?
Yeah, I think in women's sport, there's almost an opposite set of issues where you're presumed to be a lesbian until proven straight. And I think if you watch, like if you see USA Canada play in the World Championships or the Olympics, over half the players are wearing makeup on the ice.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they have to do that to feminize themselves so that people don't think they're, you know, a masculine woman is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of men's sport, especially men's team sports, the issue of somebody being gay is still seen as less than, because in male team sports, the way to put one another down is by feminizing, you know, the B word and the P word, or using homophobic language. And that's almost saying that this is a man, this is, you know, where you have to be to play hockey. And you're down here if you're a woman or if you're gay. You're less than that ideal stereotype of a hypermasculine man, which is BS and an illusion. And, you know, I think there's hypermasculine gay men and there's less masculine straight men, and it doesn't, none of that should dictate your ability to play sport.
Right. And how much do you think, I mean, you know, as we've gone through time here and as, you know, these kind of issues have been brought more to light and we've had more allies come forward and there's been more acceptance, what is kind of importance does it hold for, you know, Jesse talked about people in power in these leagues and stuff, showing allyship, but what about these leagues and teams as a whole, you know, saying, hey, we stand with this community, holding events that kind of bring awareness to these kind of things and show support to these athletes who identify with this? What kind of importance does that hold in the bigger picture of things as well?
Quite honestly, I think it doesn't hold any, and I think it actually sets things back.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because no work is done behind the scenes to actually shift culture. So it's performative in nature, in my opinion. You know, putting rainbow tape on a stick isn't going to help that closeted player in the locker room, and isn't going to help that kid that's struggling at home who comes to me, and I get all those kids that are suicidal or struggling or want to quit the sport or have quit the sport. So to me, it box ticks in a sense. It's performative, like we're inclusive. However, we haven't done anything to really shift locker room culture, the language and behaviors within it, that hypermasculine alpha type of attitudes that are, you know, still there. We see it. We've seen it through COVID with the sexism and different things that have happened with players. And there's no humanization of actual struggle of people who are within sport. When you hear stories and it's humanized for you, you tend to feel it.
Yeah.
We've seen through the Black Lives Matter movement, and then some players coming out and saying, hey, I've experienced racism in this sport, that it was humanized, and 160 or 180 of the players made public statements and wanted to learn more. But when you don't do that and you go, hey, we have a Pride Night, we have a Hockey's for Everyone campaign. To me, and I've said this a few times now, it's like having the championship before winning, or having the parade before winning the championship. You're celebrating something you haven't shifted yet. And you're celebrating it in a way that makes it's great for people in front offices.
Right.
Where that's corporate culture and it is more inclusive. But it's not even shifting things for fans, because they're coming to me and they're in arenas and they're being called names when they show up that night. So you haven't shifted your fan culture, you haven't shifted your players, you haven't humanized for them, nothing's been done at the minor hockey level to evolve it, except for like 3-minute videos. And it's a perpetual cycle that, you know, just keeps going generation after after generation. So to me, and it gives an excuse for people within the sport to go, well, look, we had a pride night, we're inclusive. So I think it actually sets things back.
Yeah. That's a really interesting way to look at it that I mean, I've thought about that a bit, but not to that extent. And I guess, you know, this short question has a long answer, but what needs to be done then behind the scenes? I mean, if you could take the reins and say, here's what I would change, here's what I would do. I know there's a lot of different routes that can be taken to make changes. But what are some things that you wish all teams and all leagues, no matter the age, no matter the level, would start to do to start that internal change?
Yeah, and I've begged and pleaded different leagues to take a different approach.
Yeah.
And it falls on deaf ears. First thing that needs to be done is recognizing the issues. Racism, sexism, homophobia, abuse, mental illness. There's 5 major ones right off the top. You know, and there's others, but you know, let's just say, okay, there's 5.
Yeah.
Start somewhere. I mean, take your pick, right? Like, take any of those. Like,
yeah, but let's say you start with those 5, and then from there you need to humanize them. And the reality is, hockey is such an insular sport, and more insular than any other sport, because it's not played at the school level. And even when it is in, like, I know in Minnesota, it's the high school hockey is big, but they're not playing it in the high school. They're playing it off in an arena.
Right.
So they're isolated. They're isolated from the age of 7 in these arenas, and usually with the same people throughout their whole lives, 6 nights a week, until they move away to play junior, and then move away to play NCAA or major junior. And it's the only sport that so many kids move away at such a young age. So it's incredibly insular in nature, and you're spending 6 to 7 days a week with people that look like you, sound like you, talk like you. You can always tell a hockey player. They dress the same, talk the same, act the same, and it's the conformity within the sport is wild. So they don't recognize these issues exist because they're in a bubble. Whereas if you were a volleyball player or a basketball player or something, you're all in the same high school and you're sharing a locker room, and there's people from different walks of life, and men's teams are there, women's teams are there. There's still academics at the school. There's academics who are helping coach. You're exposed to more. There's more diversity. There's gay straight alliances still at the school, whatever. There's nothing here. And your only coach came from the culture. Your influencer at a young age came from the same culture. And as you get a little older, you're influenced by the 20-year-olds when you're 16, who, you know, had been influenced by coaches in that culture as well. So I think humanizing, and humanizing using people who have the lived experience within the sport, because it is so insular, they're not going to listen to anyone else. The only way to open their ears initially and get them to feel it and recognize it is by having stories shared of people who have the lived experience within it. A woman who has been in men's hockey who has experienced sexism. Somebody like myself who's gay in men's hockey, who's experienced homophobia and heard that language on a daily basis, and the impact that had. A player of color, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Once it's humanized, as we saw again through the Black Lives Matter movement, and then players coming out and saying racism exists in our sport, they will be more likely and more willing to be educated. And the issue with the education is they're not getting it from people who study. There are educators out there, like academics, who study homophobia in men's hockey, who study sexism in men's hockey, abuse, racism, etc. So they have a deep fundamental understanding of the culture and the issue within it. Why aren't they the ones putting the education curriculums together for players at all levels? This boggles my mind. And I can't for the life of me figure out why they're not the people.
right.
And they're not, because the gatekeepers want to control at every level. After you educate them, you need to put together better policy and put together proper atonement for infractions. You need to have things in place. Like, you can't just put a rule in, oh, it's a 5-game suspension if you say something homophobic.
Yeah.
Watch the 13th or any documentary or read anything on, policing versus reform. And you will see that the best way to shift things is through reforming people and having more education and empowering them and having them be, a part of the solution as opposed to a part of the problem. And then from there, we need to break down the conformity within the sport. And I just talked to, I just did something with Sarah Sivian in the Athletic, and I talked about it there where I said, somebody like Dougie Hamilton's been traded twice because he'd rather read or go to a museum and he's introverted than go drink beers with the boys.
Right.
And the issue that somebody, a 6'5" right-hand shot defenseman who puts up a point a game, it's nearly impossible to find in hockey. It's been traded twice because he likes to learn and be educated, is so indicative of the culture.
Right.
So we got to break that conformity. And one of the things I do now is when I go around to teams, after I'm done, I say, and I've humanized and shifted language, and I talk a lot about language and the importance of shifting that because I think it's the easiest step. And I talk about different forms of it. I say, okay, now you tell me your family or brothers or some analogy. Share something with me you wouldn't typically share with a teammate. I had a tough guy of a team stand up and say, I love writing poetry. I had another player stand up, in junior hockey. I had another player stand up and say, if I don't make the NHL, I'm going to be a zoologist. First year player across the room jumped out of his seat and said, I love animal documentaries. The coach stood up and said, I love Broadway musicals. And my wife and I go to them every summer.
Yeah.
Now they're bonding on a deeper level. They don't know a thing about each other except for, because all they talk about are women, partying, sports.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's almost like hockey especially is afraid to admit its faults sometimes, right? We're scared to say that this is wrong. It seems, we love hockey. It's the greatest game in the world, but there is a very serious problem in the culture and that needs to be addressed, but we're scared to be outward about that. It seems everyone's kind of very defensive, like, no, we're good hockey people. It seems very different. And it's like, if you guys admit that there are faults and there are things that need to change. I mean, a big one that's come to light, obviously, is in the OHL, and you're very familiar with that, right? The culture and the toxicity there that exists is not okay. And to have kids, and I say kids because Eric Guest, for instance, is a child, right? And these are kids that, like you said, they are moved away from their homes and they're with their teammates and their coaches, and to be exposed to a culture that has hazing that still goes on, just aggressive hazing too, based on what Dan Carcillo has said. How do you start there? And because I mean, again, it has to start at the grassroots up, right? You can't start at the top and change the top and not expect it to do the bottom. It almost seems the bottom needs to work up. How do you change even that dynamic? And again, that's in general, right?
Well, I think the approach has to be streamlined and simultaneously shifted, and I think it's a 3-tier approach. I used to say top down, bottom up, but now I've shifted that in the last little while to 3 tiers: the NHL, junior NCAA, and from the bottom up. And the reason for that is I think that junior hockey players in Canada and in like the USHL and whatnot, like major junior USHL, have the most social influence of anybody in the sport. And in Canada in particular, I think they have the most cultural influence of anyone in the country. Adults treat them like NHL players. They revere them the same way, except now they can talk to them. Their peers engage with them at school, at parties, in bars if they're old enough, or even when they're not old enough. They are they still engage with people their own age in classrooms and whatnot. And a lot of those kids, especially in Canada, grew up wanting to play hockey, or in states like Minnesota, grew up wanting to play hockey. so they kind of, conform to the same culture because they wanted to be a part of it. And then younger kids, minor hockey kids, etc., look up to them and treat them the same way as they do NHL players, except now they're accessible. They go to their practices, they see them after games, they see them out in the towns. And they're I equate them to like Instagram influencers or YouTubers, where NHL, like Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid, that's Brad Pitt. Right? So
I mean, yes, based on looks alone. No. Connor McDavid could very easily be a Brad Pitt, I think.
But so I think the process has to be simultaneously and streamlined throughout, but it has to be a 3-tier process. In terms of that area, it's problematic, but that starts long before there. That starts at the grassroots level. You're told at 9 years old what's said in the room stays in the room. I have stories of people coming to me, and it's not just the OHL, like across the CHL. Like there was a coach in the WHL last year who told his team, I don't want any faggots on this team. If you're gay, get the F out. And, I know of a kid in another league who tried to come out, and his team told him, if you come out, you're cut.
That just is insane, because it sounds insane, right? When you say it, it sounds insane, but the fact that it's real though, like that's just
and current.
And people keep saying, well, this was 10 years ago, like talking about Carcillo and whatnot. John Van Beesbrook still works for USA Hockey. Like I've worked with USA Hockey and whatnot, but I was there when John did that. Like I had left the Sioux a week before. There's issues there, and there's never been proper atonement for what was done. So minor hockey, this coach that Carcillo's talking about, like parents who had that coach later in minor hockey, 11 kids from the minor hockey team he coached left and went to another community. They went to the OHF, the Ontario Hockey Federation. They went to Hockey Canada about him, and nothing's been done. This was before
is that, do you think? Like what is just hockey in general trying to say, nope, again, we're not having this problem. Like why does this stuff continue to happen?
So the gatekeepers, I think especially at the lower levels and working up, when you get to the NHL level, it's all about money and fear, and it's very reactionary in nature. The whole culture is so reactionary. They, until there was rapes like that were, people came forward with rape cases. There was no education on, that type of thing and how to treat women. Until a player committed suicide, there was nothing on mental health. And it's such a reactionary culture, because the reason I think they don't want to admit any problems is because the culture's been so problematic for so long. And while I think most of them are good people can be products of bad environments. And like even Dan did a lot of shitty things, Carcillo, but he was also abused prior to.
Right.
So I think a lot of hockey people have some skeletons in their closet that they don't want to come out, and it's easier to protect others than have your stuff exposed to. And it would almost be better if they all just came out with it, or just moved out of the way. Stay in your roles, but move out of the way and let people shift for the next generations.
Right.
And they don't want to do that. Like I had a prominent, and I'm not going to say which team offer to go into the Greater Toronto Hockey League, the biggest minor hockey league in the world, right? Over 40,000 teams, and work on shifting the culture with me.
That's awesome.
Except the president of the Minor Hockey Association said no. Like it just boggles my mind that people aren't willing to do this. They would rather create a 5-minute video and go poof. But even like we saw it recently in the US, where there was an incident of a coach who was abusing kids and just got banned for life, and he was protected. And we have to do more to shift the culture. that stuff can't be, you know, not speaking out is being complicit in all of it. We're learning that in terms of, you know, racism. It's not enough to say yourself, oh, I'm not racist. We have to be anti-racist. And I have this new philosophy of the anti. We must be the anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobic, or anti-homophobia, anti-abuse, you know, and these types of things, and speak out against them.
Absolutely. I think, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that it, you know, when we've covered issues like this and talked to people who have these lived experiences and just kind of hearing what they're doing to make their differences, I think it says a lot, you know, about the fact that, you know, you went through all of this and still you're trying to make a difference for a sport that you grew up loving. You're trying to make a difference in a culture that needs help, you know, getting the ball rolling and isn't always doing the right things. And I think that says a lot that there's people who are so dedicated to it that they see the issues and they love the thing still and want to make a difference and make it a better and safe place. And I know when we talked about these kind of things with other guests in the past and stuff, I always like to ask, you know, kind of what your hope is for the future. And I know hope can be a really dangerous thing, and it can be something that, you know, we don't always have the answers and we can hope for a million things and not get them. But when you look at what things look like in a year from now, and 5 years and 10 years, you know, not even just with what you're doing specifically, but just the overall picture of this in the hockey community, what is your hope? I mean, what do you have positives that you think will come in the near future, or do you think this is a long-term thing, unfortunately, that we might not see changes right away?
You know, it's tough because, like, in terms of people like myself who are trying to shift it based off our lived experiences, I get accused almost daily of trying to burn down hockey. I have thousands of stories. I have enough stories that I have, you know, the canister of gasoline in one hand and I have a lighter in the other.
Yeah.
If I wanted to burn down hockey, I could have burned down hockey a long time ago and still could.
Yeah.
So I want people to recognize that. Like, I'm not, and I get, you know, threats constantly. If I talk about the NHL, I get death threats. If I wanted to burn down hockey, it'd be burned. I don't. I want to reform and shift it. And I want that to be known because, like, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. I do this work, like when I work with teams, I've never made a dime off hockey trying to shift the culture. You know, and that's exhaustive work.
Yeah.
Do you see right now as kind of an opportunity for you with the, like, diversity efforts that are going forward with the NHL? Do you see this as an opportunity for you to kind of latch onto this and say, you know what, us too?
Well, I think that I don't think there's a good time or a bad time. I think it's always time.
Right.
You know, and I there's some things that I want to come out and want to bring up, but I've tried to be respectful in the past month of the Black Lives Matter movement and the shifts within hockey, like in the NHL. Like, those players who created that alliance, they're not working with the NHL.
Yeah.
You know, that's individual. So, I mean, I'm tired of committees. I'm tired of, you know, I predicted after racial incidents came out and then Carcillo's lawsuit and whatnot, I called it in media for the last week and a half that the Hockey Canada, the OHF, everyone else can create a new task force. And it's the same people talking about the same shit without any fucking solutions. And I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this, but
Curse,
You're
go
good.
for it. We'll put
Okay,
explicit.
I'll check that checkbox.
So I'm not hopeful or optimistic in a shift in the culture because I don't know what committees do other than, you know, talk. And I think we've been talking, I've been talking about this openly with ways to shift it for over 4 years.
Right.
With a lived experience, degrees in communication and sports communication. So like understanding how messaging works, and also being certified in diversity and inclusion, where I, can teach this stuff. And with all these academics who are out there who are becoming more prominent in the media and not getting and not getting even calls to be a part. So to me, I'm not optimistic or hopeful anything will change. I think it's more, I like the term that's come out. I've seen a lot through the past month through Black Lives Matter, performative allyship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's incredibly performative from all the levels as a way to go, see, look, we tried something. And it's like, yeah, but you're not listening. You're not hearing what needs to change. Is it opportunistic to try and jump on now? Like, would it be a good opportunity? Yeah, maybe. I think everyone's tired of the way it's happening and the way it's continued to happen. So I think we all want to see a shift. All minorities and a lot of, allies to minorities are fed up with hockey culture. And I don't know. I don't think engaging with the NHL's initiative is going to shift anything. And I think the more people like myself who join just gives it fake credit. And, and I hope that other initiative, improves racism within the sport. I don't know how they're going about it. I haven't really engaged with them yet. I'm working on something myself, like a Queer Hockey Alliance, to first and foremost, a lot of people struggle. A lot of people feel alone who've been in the sport, who have experienced harassment or abuse and whatnot. And I want it to be a healing place. I want it to be a space where people can share their stories and have peer support and start to shift that way. And then from there, empower one another to amplify voices and to push things out there.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's hard, right? Because like we've said, there's just because you're sticking a pride flag on your team logo doesn't mean that you're changing the way that players are speaking, the way the players are acting. Again, it's the culture, and we've talked about it relentlessly for a little bit now, because we love the game, you guys. We're not saying that we don't like hockey. We love hockey. We love that sport itself. We think it's a very pure, it can be a really great game, but we're talking about the culture that does exist, and we have to open our eyes a little bit to it. I mean, it started with us when we talked about the sexism as players, DMs started coming out and how they treat women. And again, as females, we have a very direct connection to that because we felt it. And part of it, I think sometimes we do let it go too long. It plays out in the media as the funny hockey culture, right? Or like Letterkenny. Everybody loves Letterkenny. And not to say that's not a funny show, but it puts a light on this culture and makes it okay sometimes, right? Or even you go back to old hockey movies, Youngblood, and look at how much that made, Tea with Miss McGee, and it's funny and it's all meant in light, but it's a true, there's a beam of truth
exists.
too. Exactly, right? Like it's just kind of crazy.
And for that matter, talking about, I think people get very defensive when you talk about hockey culture.
Yeah, they do.
Because they're immersed in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And either they're a part of it, or their child's a part of it, or they've been a part of it, and then they see it as a reflection on themselves. Or in Canada, I mean, hockey is Canadiana.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is our identity as Canadians. Like it's, what we pride ourselves most on. So then people would have to look internally at themselves and reflect on, wow, have I been a part of something that's been so shitty to so many people? And it's almost like the Catholic Church in that sense.
Yeah.
And what I try and tell people is separate the individual. Little Johnny's a good boy.
Mm-hmm.
So take him out of the equation, but look at the culture separately from your child within it, because your child within is a different person than you may have at home.
Right.
And when you do that, you can, objectively look at it as opposed to subjectively. And I think that's critical to take the blinders off and not identify as that being like, I think it's kind of gross that in Canada we identify as hockey as being our, us. It's like we're human beings and hockey is something we do. And you have to like look at that culture objectively and then reflect on yourself. It's the same thing with a lot of the Canadians were saying, oh, well, I'm so happy I'm not American through all the racism. And it's like, well, people of color haven't been treated well here. We had residential schools, and for any American listeners, just look that up. It's awful. And different things like that throughout our history that we haven't been much, if better at all. But we tend to look at ourselves in that way. And I think we put blinders on, and we do it with hockey culture too.
I know 100%. I've used the analogy in previous episodes. Again, we've kind of covered issues like this and talking about the hockey culture. And I've always said that it's just like if you had somebody you loved and they were doing something destructive to themselves or other people around them, just because, you love them doesn't mean you should ignore those destructive qualities. You should want to help them get better and fix that part of them so that they can become a better person, a healthier person. It's the same thing with hockey. We can love the sport and say, this is a big part of our lives. It's something we enjoy indulging in, whether it's playing or covering it as a reporter or watching it as a fan, and still say there's things wrong here that need to be fixed to make this a healthier sport for the people involved, for the people who watch it. And so that's kind of the way I try to look at it. Is it's not saying you don't love it or it's the worst thing ever. It's just saying we love it, but there's still problems we want to fix. And I think that's an important way to try to look at it.
And even for like the gatekeepers, like the people who are in control and power, I think they fear that if it shifts, they will lose their place.
Yeah.
And I think that's society in general, right? That's oppression of women. That's systemic racism and homophobia that exists in cultures where, jobs and whatnot are all set up to, enhance, like society set up to enhance the lives of a certain group.
Yeah.
But I think, what people need to realize is this isn't about taking power and control away from you. It's about giving other people some as well.
Sure. And
or relinquishing in general, like, why do we need power and control? I hate that stuff to begin with, but it's, if the analogy is a restaurant, we don't want to take your seat away so you can't eat, but we're outside and we're hungry. We just want a table too.
Mm-hmm.
And we can all coexist in this world, and we just have to make slight shifts to make it inclusive for everyone to coexist. We're not taking away your ability. Like, it's like when Brett Hull said, they're taking the fun out of hockey. You can still have fun in hockey without being a misogynist pig.
Yeah.
Just without being a jerk. Like, just stop being jerks. Like, it's really that.
Don't be a jerk.
And if that's fun to you, then
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. Like, if that's your idea of fun, then
that's where I go to reforming. Brett Hull has a mother, may have aunts, grandmother, might have daughters. I don't know Brett Hull's life. I don't care about Brett Hull's life, but, but like, there's probably women in his life, and to make comments like that, you're saying that you're okay if somebody does that to those people in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And just by humanizing it a little bit, maybe Brett Hull is a good person deep down and will reflect and recognize, but he's been in this insular bubble for so long that he doesn't even recognize. So I think we have to give people the opportunity to grow. Like, I'm not a huge fan of cancel culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to give people the opportunity to grow and learn, but we have to put it out there for them in a way that humanizes it, so they're willing to, or so they want to grow and learn.
Yeah.
100%. No, I do. I think, and hopefully as we expose a little bit more and pull back the curtains and take a harder look, hopefully more people become woke to it. I think COVID has helped in that, because you have nothing else to do. You can't watch the game right now. There's no playoffs. Like, you have to admit this and you have to address this. And I do hope that leadership starts to take things a little bit more seriously and starts to actually listen. And like you said, educate yourself. We're going to wrap up here, but before we let you go, probably the most important question that we have for you. You're from Sudbury, correct?
Yes.
Do you know the Foligno family, and would you like to be part of Alexis's Marcus Foligno fan club?
I grew up training with the Folignos. I've known them since we were young. Also one of Marcus in Minnesota now.
Marcus is with the Wild, and Nick is in Columbus.
Columbus.
Yeah, I knew Nick was in Columbus. I just know Marcus been a few places now.
Yeah.
But actually somebody I also grew up training with for a very long time, and is a close family friend, is Andrew Burnett.
Oh, Bruno. We had him on the
Bruno.
podcast a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Well, he's a family friend. I've known Boomer since I was 15. I used to train with him since I was a kid.
Oh, that's
Fun.
awesome.
So a lot of ties to Minnesota there.
So you're cheering for the Wild to win the Stanley Cup. Is that what I'm also hearing? That's kind of what I'm taking from there.
Well, are they going to make the playoffs?
They're
They'll
in the
be
playoffs.
playing
I mean, 24
Vancouver.
teams
They
made the
made it.
playoffs.
They made
It's
it.
sad if they didn't, but
They were
I
on the
don't know.
bubble.
I actually I was really conflicted because my favorite player growing up is Patrick Roy,
Oh, okay.
and Andrew was the last person to score on
Score
him.
on him.
just embarrassed him. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
sad.
and Andrew has the best set of hands in tight spaces that I've ever
Yep.
seen in my life.
Yeah.
People don't really realize how good and skilled he was. And I think he got overshadowed a little bit by, he not being the most fluid skater in the world.
Yeah.
But no, Marcus, I've known Marcus, I've known Nick forever. Great people,
Mhm.
really good family. My brother, I think, played with Marcus in the O, and just awesome group of awesome family doing great things out there with their initiatives for cancer and for sick kids and whatnot. So
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Alexis
cool.
is obsessed with him. So
Yeah.
obsessed.
He's one of my favorite players. What can I say?
Why?
I love the feisty
Great question.
players. Yep.
question.
I cover both women's and men's hockey, NWHL and NHL, and the feisty ones always have a special place in my heart. Those and goalies. Those are like my two favorites. So I love Marcus Foligno. Yeah.
Well,
He's not hard on the eyes either. So I'm sure that plays,
I was gonna
right?
say I thought it I didn't want to say it, but I mean,
Oh, he's cute
those
too. Yeah.
eyes.
No,
Yeah.
he's cute too.
No, we're the progressive women. We can cover the sport and still be women,
think
right?
they're
And be
cute.
like,
Yeah.
he's not. He's
Yeah,
cute.
see, I'm not allowed. If I ever did that,
Yeah.
like I'm not allowed at that point to talk
No.
about his
Of course not.
blue eyes and whatnot.
His dreamy blue eyes.
Yeah.
No, I love it. Well, Brock, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about your initiatives and what you're doing, and just follow along with you?
Yeah, so on Instagram, Brock McGillis 33. On Twitter, Brock_McGillis. My website's brockmcgillis.com. If anyone's struggling or needs anything, feel free to DM anytime. My DMs are always open. I try and help anyone I can when I can and help them find alternative support or additional support in their regions. And I'm working on a queer hockey alliance for queer people and allies. So if anyone wants to take part in that, it's open to anybody, and the more the merrier, and really want to use it as a way to amplify and shift the sport.
Heck yeah. Let's make a change, people, for real this time, too. Let's not just talk about it. Let's actually do something. So, again, Brock, thank you so much for coming on and enlightening us and sharing your story and telling people, again, how we can help move forward and become more progressive. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. And we're back. Thanks again to Brock for joining us. Such a cool dude. And I love everything that he's trying to change. And he's absolutely right. Like, we need to change it, guys. Come on now. Let's get it going. Let's stop talking about it. Because hockey is for everyone. It shouldn't just be a phrase. Like, it legit needs to be for everyone.
It should be a phrase or a phase.
Or a
it
phase,
should be long lasting. It should be, you know, as Brock kept saying, that kind of institutional change, that, internal change, and at all levels. Like, it's not just the NHL. It's not just, we touched on women's hockey. It's not just, little bits here and there. There's big changes that need to change But if those changes are made, you are looking at a much more inclusive and welcoming place for some of these players who have not felt safe or welcomed.
And doesn't that sound terrible? Why does that sound terrible, guys? Like,
I don't. This is what doesn't make sense to me. It's like, what part of you is like, yeah, let's not do that? Like, it blows my mind that there's people who just don't understand that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
It's the people that want the original 6 teams only.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah, we get it. Okay. We get it. There's 30 something teams now, and hockey is for everyone truly, so make them feel like that. So,
right, exactly. So no, thanks again to Brock, and obviously thanks to our buddy Mick. We love you. Always a good time having you on.
I love Pat.
He'll be back. He'll always be back.
Of course.
He's our top guest. So we love you both. And as we conclude every segment, Alexis dives into her hockey diary to expose things, I guess. Expose the Wild. This is mostly exposing the Wild or the officiating.
Oh, yeah, officiating
so
or both.
Without further ado, here's Dear Diary with Alexis.
This is a big old rant I've been saving up from November 20th, 2010, Wild versus Rangers. If you're here to find out about the big disgrace and haven't fallen out of your chair yet, I have one word for you. Oh shoot, my pen is running out of ink. Offsides! If you don't believe this completely true story I just told you, well, you're wrong. And if you refuse to believe that, contact me and I can show you the picture where you can clearly see both of the Ranger players' skates over the line before the puck. And, well, if you still don't believe me, I'll show you the video I got the picture from. And if you still don't believe that, you have 2 options. One, you could run, which may be the smarter option because I probably won't be able to catch you. Or I will personally send you to an eye doctor because your eyesight is out of whack.
Who are you?
Wow.
Like, who are you talking to? My pen is running out of ink.
You wrote that.
I wrote that. I really did. That came right from the soul. That was like the depths of my anger as a child. Like, every time I've seen that one when we do Dear Diary, I'm like, I feel like I need to save that. Like, there's a time for that one. There's a lot to digest there. Like, a lot to unpack. Fred's giving me the look where he's about to like.
So wait, when you wrote, oh shoot, my pen's running out of ink. Did it actually just gradually fade as you wrote to the right?
I could take a picture of the book and show you because it's actually fading. And then offsides is written in all capital letters in like a fresh pen.
Why didn't you just get a fresh pen? Why did you have to write that as it's dying?
It was a stream of consciousness entry. It was just I was building up dramatic effect for the big disgrace.
Wow.
You're my
November
favorite
20th, 2010. The big
You are
disgrace.
a legend. You're an icon, frankly.
I was. Not so much anymore. When that was written, maybe, but I've gone through new phases since then.
Woo! All right.
Yeah,
That's
Ben.
Ben.
That was a lot.
That's Dear Diary with Alexis. Bravo, my dear.
Wait, hold on. I have to ask this question.
Okay.
Do you have current diaries where this is happening?
No.
Oh, damn.
I stopped these. I don't even know how old I was when I stopped these. Maybe like 16. I went for a pretty long time with these, but
Can we start them up again?
Yeah.
do you want me to?
When
yeah.
the season starts
hockey
happening.
I mean, that's what
Can we
Twitter
please?
is, right? Like
That's true. Yeah,
That's
Twitter's
what
just her
Twitter
new
is.
form of it.
Yeah,
Twitter,
exactly.
but I can. That would be a good bit. Like Dear Diary then versus now.
Yeah. It's on. Guys, if you want it, let us know. You know what? You know what else? Let us know how much you love this podcast, how much you like us anyway. Don't forget to subscribe, rate,
5 stars.
share. Did you like that transition, guys? God, I'm getting really good at these transitions.
That was
So
smooth.
good.
That was a
so
smooth
good.
one.
That was good,
So
guys.
good.
Thank you.
It was the chicken nuggets.
That was the chicken nuggets. Thanks. Shout out to my hubs for bringing me chicken nuggets because I was hungover from boat day.
Classic.
Yeah, I know, guys. He's a lucky
Classic
one.
summer horror story.
I know. No, and thanks again to everybody. Thanks to Soda Stick for presenting this podcast. Is that the right way? Sponsoring this podcast.
They're a
Presenting
presenting
it.
They
sponsor.
know what we mean.
Presenting sponsors.
We love it.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone for tuning in every week. We'll be back again next week with some more great content for you.
And no beard for Fred next week.
Fred's getting a beard.
Guys, tune in for that. That
Are you
alone.
cutting your hair too?
I'm getting the COVID is going bye.
Oh.
No.
Adios.
Yeah. Adios.
Nice. It's out. We'll bye to Fred's beard. We'll see. We'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.